For the past few decades, there's this one book that's just loomed over everything we think about popular history. It sparked so much praise, but also, man, so much debate. I'm talking about Jared Diamond's Guns, Germs, and Steel. It set out to answer literally one of the biggest questions in all of history. So the big question for us today is, how well does that famous theory actually hold up? Let's dive in and find out.
Okay, first things first. We really can't overstate just how huge this book was. I mean, this wasn't some dusty old academic text sitting on a shelf. No way. It was a global phenomenon. It won a Pulitzer Prize. It's been translated into tons of languages. It completely changed how millions of us think about our past. And really, the whole thing, the whole massive book, it all boils down to one single, incredibly powerful question.
And that question is this: why? Why did wealth and power end up so unevenly spread across the globe? Why was it Europeans who conquered the Americas and not the other way around? For centuries, the answers to that question, well, they often went to some really ugly racist places, right? All this nonsense about the supposed superiority of one group of people over another. Diamond wanted to just throw all of that out. He wanted to offer a totally different explanation, one that wasn't rooted in people at all, but in place.
And here it is, his core idea, right on the screen. History followed different courses for different peoples because of differences among people's environments, not because of biological differences among peoples themselves. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. He just completely rejects those racist explanations and puts geography front and center. Diamond's whole argument is that the key differences between all of us, it just came down to the environmental cards each society was dealt thousands and thousands of years ago.
So, okay, how does this geography as destiny thing actually work? Well, Diamond's whole argument is built on a few really key pillars, and it all starts with the basic raw materials of civilization.
All right, check this out. It really all kicks off with the animals. Just look at the insane head start Eurasia had right from the get-go. They had a whopping 72 species of big mammals roaming around, and out of those, they managed to domesticate 13 of them. Think horses, cows, pigs, sheep. Now compare that to the Americas. Just one, the llama. That's it. In sub-Saharan Africa and Australia, zero. Absolutely zero. And you gotta understand, this wasn't just about having more food. No, this was about having living tractors for farming, horsepower for transportation, and, yeah, literal engines of war.
And the lucky streak didn't stop with animals. No siree. Eurasia also basically hit the botanical jackpot. It was home to almost all of the world's most valuable grains. We're talking things like wheat and barley. Super high in protein, easy to grow, easy to store. This meant they could create huge food surpluses. And that's a game changer, right? Because once you have a surplus, not everyone has to be a farmer anymore. You can have specialists, you can have soldiers, priests, blacksmiths, inventors, the whole shebang.
And here's where it all comes together. This is the crucial point. These early advantages in farming and animals, they snowballed. More food meant larger, denser populations. And these huge populations were living packed together, right next to their domesticated animals. This unique setup led to all sorts of technological advances, the guns and the steel from the title, but it also led to something way deadlier: germs. See, living with animals for centuries meant Eurasians built up immunities to all sorts of nasty diseases that jumped from animals to humans. For people in other parts of the world who didn't have that long history, the diseases the Eurasians brought with them were, frankly, more devastating than any weapon could ever be.
Okay, and Diamond has one last big piece to his puzzle: the actual shape of the continents. Just picture it. He says Eurasia's long, horizontal east-west layout was a massive advantage. Why? Because crops, animals, and even ideas could spread like wildfire across thousands of miles of similar latitudes and climates. Now contrast that with the Americas. Its north-south vertical layout created all these climate barriers. Deserts, jungles. It made it way harder for things like maize to spread. So yeah, it's a huge, sweeping, really powerful theory, and as you can probably guess, it was about to face a serious storm of criticism. Right. So like I said, a theory this big, this all-encompassing, you just know it's going to attract a ton of pushback. And it did. Historians, anthropologists, geographers, they all started poking some pretty major holes in Diamond's argument. So one of the biggest counter-theories out there is that no, it's not geography that's the key, it's institutions. Think about it. Take North and South Korea. You've got the exact same geography, same people, basically the same history up to a point, but you could not have more radically different outcomes, right? And that's all down to their political and economic systems. This idea argues that it's the rules we humans make up, property rights, laws, governments, that really decide whether a society sinks or swims.
Now, academics have a fancy term for what Diamond is doing.
They call it environmental determinism. It's this idea that the physical environment is basically the main character in the story of human history, and people are just following a script. And to be honest, a lot of scholars today see this as a pretty flawed, kind of outdated way of looking at things, mainly because it just doesn't leave much room for human choice, for culture, or for our amazing ability to innovate.
And anthropologists especially really push back hard on this. Their whole thing is that humans are not just passive puppets of their environment. Come on, we actively shape our surroundings. We come up with these incredibly creative solutions to huge challenges, and we often build these amazing, complex societies in places where, according to Diamond's theory, it should be totally impossible.
See, Diamond's theory kind of suggests you need perfect farming conditions, right? Like a fertile river valley to build a big, complex society. But as this quote points out, that's just not what we're finding. Recent archaeology, especially with all this cool new technology, is showing us a completely different picture.
I mean, just take the Amazon rainforest. For the longest time, everyone thought, no way, the soil's too poor. You could never support a big population there. But guess what? We now know that ancient societies there built these enormous earthworks and developed this incredibly sophisticated turtle aquaculture. Yeah, you heard me right. They were basically farming turtles and fish in man-made ponds to create a totally sustainable food source. They weren't just adapting to their environment, they were re-engineering.
And believe me, the critiques do not stop there. Historians will tell you the book completely ignores contingency, sheer luck. The Spanish conquest of the Inca, for example, wasn't some foregone conclusion. It hinged on a few very specific lucky breaks that could have easily gone the other way. And what about that whole north-south axis being a massive barrier? Well, critics point out that it didn't stop maize from spreading all the way from the Andes to Canada. So the argument goes that Diamond's theory it simplifies a reality that was way, way more complex and messy.
Okay, so after hearing all of that, all these criticisms, you might be thinking, so is the book just wrong? Is there anything left of this grand theory at all? Well, not exactly. The thing is, even many of its biggest critics will admit the book is still really, really important. It took guts to ask such enormous questions, and it absolutely forced a lot of different fields, history, anthropology, you name it, to start taking the role of the environment in our story way more seriously.
I think this quote really nails the general feeling about the book now. It says, GGS may be a diamond in the rough, but it is a diamond nonetheless. And that kind of says it all, doesn't it? It's flawed, sure, maybe even deeply flawed in some spots, but there's something genuinely valuable at its core. It really is a diamond in the rough.
So let's do a final tally, a sort of pro-con list. The strengths? They're huge. The book asks these massive, compelling questions that we should be asking, and it gives us a powerful, non-racist framework to think about them. It also really forces us to look at the environment's role. But the weaknesses are pretty significant too. It is, you could argue, way too deterministic. It ignores culture and the messiness of actual history. And here's the real kicker. For a book that set out to be anti-racist, a lot of people now say that by making European dominance seem like this geographic inevitability, the argument itself ends up feeling kind of Eurocentric. It's a real irony.
So in the end, the whole debate over guns, germs, and steel really leaves us with this one giant question, doesn't it? How much of our story is written for us by our environment, and how much of it do we get to write ourselves? It's this constant battle, this tension between geography and human ingenuity. And, while Jared Diamond might have pushed the geography argument a little too far for some people, he absolutely forced all of us to think about that fundamental question of who we are and how in the world we got here.